I'm actually really excited for Mock Draft Monday today because this will continue the season-long trend of this being the best mock draft I've put out to date for 2025. And make sure you're subscribed. I've got a sneaking suspicion that next week may be the same case. As always, no trades until we get closer to the draft. And also, it's really important to listen to what I say rather than to just skip to your team, see the pick, and then get mad in the comments section. Just got done reading a comment that was really upset. I had the Steelers taking an edge rusher, even though he's not necessarily an edge, and I made sure to say that in the video. He's like, he's replacing Cam Hayward long-term? Cam Hayward's not an edge. Well, Jamar Stewart is 290, almost 300 pounds. I never said he's definitely going to be an edge rusher on the Steelers. That's not necessarily a big need for them. And even though it's best player available in the draft, especially in the first round a lot, he would not have been taken to be an edge. You got to pay attention. Let's use our listening ears. Anyway, at number 1 overall, no trades, of course, as I've said. That means Travis Hunter is the number 1 overall pick while the Jags are still picking at number 1. He is the best player in the draft. He's the best player in college football. And whether or not you think that means he should win the Heisman when Ashton Genty's having the season that he's having, he's the best player in college football. He just is. He is one of the best corners, best defensive backs in college football. Should have been a Thorpe finalist probably, but such a dynamic corner. He's fantastic in zone coverage. He's athletic enough in man coverage, but he can truly do spectacular things on the defensive side of the ball. And he's also a pretty good wide receiver as well. Great ball skills is kind of the claim to fame for him, but he's also a great athlete. He's just a phenomenal player, which means right now he's the number 1 overall pick. This video is sponsored by Underdog. I think it's the absolute best place to play daily fantasy sports. You can do pick'em, you can do drafts. Of course, I kind of focus more on pick'em. You can do a number of different promos, and you have Ultra Protection, but so many different promos coming out through December. Definitely a good time to sign up using code Bengal. Link is down in the description. You can, of course, do entries for so many different sports, whether that's NFL, like we kind of focus on this channel, college football, of course, as well, but also even video games, esports, whatever. Of course, you got to remember to play responsibly. Make sure it's legal in your state as well. You won't be able to play otherwise. You have to be at least 18 plus, if not even older than that in some states. This is my entry for tonight, Monday Night Football. This is interesting, right? So I've got Courtland Sutton, higher 5.5 receptions. He's on fire with Bo Nix right now, who I have higher 229.5 passing yards. Jerry Jeudy, higher 60.5 receiving yards, and David Njoku, higher 4.5 reception. Clearly, I'm expecting the ball to be thrown quite a bit tonight. Here's the interesting thing, because Jerry Jeudy has a lower rushing plus receiving yards number than he does flat out for receiving yards. What do they know? They know something. I'm not touching it. Is he going to get an end around for -7 yards and be short? I'm not touching it. There's no way. They know something. I'm not trying it. Anyway, he's been on fire lately. Hopefully that continues with just flat out receiving yards. With code Bengal on Underdog. Link down in the description. Remember to use code Bengal. At number 2, the Las Vegas Raiders picking at the number 2 spot. I think it's going to be back-to-back Colorado players. I still lean Shedeur Sanders for being the best quarterback in the draft. He really doesn't have any elite tools, which makes it kind of a weird pick. Usually we see these quarterbacks with high upside go at the top of the draft. And I'm not sure that Shedeur Sanders screams high, incredible upside, but he is really accurate. He can extend plays, but he doesn't have this unbelievable arm. He's not unbelievably athletic. He also does a thing that Cam Ward does, which is holding the football too long, sometimes leading to sacks and turnover-worthy plays. But he's the most accurate. I think he's the best quarterback in the draft overall. And the Raiders, picking at number 2 overall, go with Shedeur Sanders. At number 3, I also think the Giants are going to swing on a quarterback. And maybe the highest upside QB in the draft is Cam Ward. He's the best play extender in the draft, but also that leads to some problems. Taking sacks at an even higher rate than Shedeur Sanders, or at least when you actually watch him, that's kind of the case. Sanders might actually be sacked more, but that could be a function more of the offensive line than the individual player. But both of these quarterbacks really do like to hold the ball for a long time, and at the pro level, you really need to get it out. On time, on target. Sanders is certainly accurate. Ward can be. He's just the type of player that's more prone to making these special plays. Now, whether or not that's going to translate, we'll have to see. I think whoever takes him is going to need to be patient. Don't really think he's going to be somebody that should play right away, but in today's day and age, forcing these QBs to start earlier than ever, and that often hurts their development. The Giants desperately need quarterback, among other things, but the Daniel Jones era is over. They take a swing on a quarterback here at number 3. I'll tell you, I honestly thought about making a video on my 3rd channel or 4th channel, Big Game Bengal, where I just talk about football. I don't post to that channel regularly, but kind of wanted to get on and just talk about how the Giants have basically screwed themselves again, and they have finally one of the top picks in the draft, as it looks right now, in a very weak quarterback class. So we'll see how that ends up panning out. At number 4, the Patriots is a very, very interesting team because we're all aware they need offensive line help. However, in these mock drafts, I like to try and get players that will actually be picked this high, right? We're not doing trades. And there really is not an offensive lineman worthy of going in the top 5 this year. There's just not, and that's where the Patriots are picking. So we have some other options. Go Teteroa McMillan, try to get a big-time weapon at receiver. Big jump ball guy, is good after the catch, but is really an exceptional jump ball, deep threat type receiver, despite not having, elite speed, but just has that size to win downfield. He's a great player. That's an option. I really like the idea of going Abdul Carter. And I know that's going to be an unpopular pick because, yes, the Patriots, it's almost certainly going to be an offensive player. We all feel, right? Need help on the offensive line desperately. There's just not one worthy of this pick, in my opinion. Need receiver help, potentially, right? There's no question about that. But I've been doing that for the Patriots. What if they decide to go a different direction? You trade away Josh Uche. You trade away Matthew Judon, right? You have completely debilitated what you have off the edge. I love the potential of Keon White, but he's not a true edge necessarily. He can do it, and he's been a great player this year, but he's kind of more one of those versatile guys. Abdul Carter has really grown into being a full-time edge this year. He's been an incredible player with game wrecker potential. He's a great athlete. No shock coming from Penn State. And I think he's going to end up being a top 5 selection. And for the Patriots, we've gone offense. I think every single mock draft that I've done for them in this 2025 cycle. But what if they decide to go with a game wrecker off the edge in a weaker offensive line class? They can potentially look to take one in the 2nd round. Yes, you could take the first one off the board. It seems a little bit early for Will Campbell or Kelvin Banks or Cameron Williams. Maybe they go edge. I know it's got to be offense, but they don't really have much off the edge either. So I think Abdul Carter is at least in play. We're going to see how this impacts things. At number 5, have the Carolina Panthers. Their offense is really starting to click a little bit with Bryce Young. He's starting to play some really good football. They still lack weapons at receiver. For that reason, this could be the first receiver off the board. But you had a lot of youth there outside of Adam Thielen. Still trying to develop Xavier Legette, obviously, as he's only a rookie. I think you have some really high upside in Jalen Coker, to be honest. So maybe you try to upgrade one of the worst defenses in the league, and I think Will Johnson would help you do that. Get one of the most talented players in the entire draft, arguably the best true corner. The Panthers have been killed this year. I mean, opposing offenses can just do whatever they want. Will Johnson can hopefully contribute to shutting down the opposing team's wide receiver 1. Jets at number 6. I'm going Mason Graham. I think you start to talk about a QB at this point, and I thought Aaron Rodgers would be there next year. Seems like that's kind of falling apart. Doesn't seem like that's going to be the case. They could improve their defensive line. Obviously, you love Quinnen Williams, but he needs some help next to him to really fully maximize his potential and the potential of that defense. Mason Graham is arguably a top 5 player in the entire draft, and the Jets, I know what you're thinking offense, but new regime coming in. It's not exactly a strong quarterback class. You have some pretty good talent at wide receiver. Whether or not Devontae Adams is there next year, that remains to be seen. It's a bit early for a tight end. You took Olu Fashanu in the first round last year. I think the offensive line's okay. Maybe this is a player on the other side of the football. At number 7, have the Tennessee Titans. Offensive line very much in play. I also think wide receiver should be. And I think Luther Burden is in play to be the first wide receiver off the board, even over Teterow and McMillan. Burden is a better athlete. He's fantastic after the catch. He can win in the slot. I think he's a special type of player. And I think he's for sure a top 10 player in the draft. Despite production being a bit down this year, I think, lack of good quarterback play can be a contributing factor in that. Of course, had some injuries with Brady Cook, and then he wasn't nearly as good as he was last year, it would seem, as we get to the Browns at number 8. And this is where the first offensive line domino falls. I'm going Kelvin Banks. I think he's got the best chance to stick at tackle out of the top couple of offensive linemen here. Will Campbell is very good, but he's got some problems that would potentially kick him inside to guard, as I continue to say. His struggles with speed are well documented off the edge, and that typically doesn't play in the NFL at tackle on an island, right? And shorter arms. Shorter arms pushes him side to guard as well, and he's a good player, but I think there are a lot of contributing factors that could make him not the first offensive lineman selected, even though maybe he's the best offensive lineman in general in the draft. He absolutely could be, but Kelvin Banks Jr., some mobility questions as well. He's on the ground a little bit too much, but really strong, mauler in the run game, and his pass pro, not too shabby either. Probably losing Jedrick Wills. Kelvin Banks is a replacement at left tackle. Saints at number 9. This is an interesting one because I think their offensive line for the future actually looks pretty good now. Tackle may be in play, depending on how you feel about Trevor Penning, who's had his ups and downs in his NFL career thus far. But they need so much more talent on the defensive line. And I think one name that's going to end up going really high in this draft is Mykel Williams from Georgia. Similarly to the rise of a Trayvon Walker, I think Mykel Williams just checks off a lot of boxes with the measurables. Extremely long arms, 6'5", 265. We know the NFL really values length in the trenches. Williams certainly fits the bill there, scratching the surface of his potential, and that type of player often goes pretty high in the draft. I think Mykel Williams will end up going somewhere near the top 10. Here it goes at number 9 to help out a pass rush in New Orleans that really could use some help long term. You look at the contract situations of a number of different defensive linemen in New Orleans. You look at some aging players as well, like Cam Jordan, for example. Williams has big time potential. We'll see if the Saints can unlock and untap that potential. Bengals at 10. I think it's just going to be Ashton Jeanty at the moment. And that's not saying the Bengals don't have different needs, right? Because T. Higgins is potentially gone. Trey Hendrickson is potentially gone. You may only be able to keep one of those guys. However, I think Jeanty's going to be a top 10 pick, and I think how far is he potentially going to fall down the board? We know running back isn't extremely valued by the NFL, but we're seeing it creep back up. You see teams running more too high now, meaning you're begging for other teams to run the ball on you, potentially. If you're taking away the big play, guess what? That revalues running back a little bit more. And I don't think anyone in the Bengals running back room stops you from taking Ashton Jeanty at number 10. Chase Brown's good. Zach Moss is fine. Jeanty is great. And I think he could be in play there at number 10. I think the Bengals have really missed Joe Mixon, and Jeanty, I think, is a great selection for Cincinnati. At 11, got the Bears. It's one of my favorite picks in the draft so far. Will Campbell to Chicago. It's my new favorite fit. They really need to improve their interior offensive line, and I think Will Campbell slides right in at guard and is a huge upgrade. I think, this is a similar situation to Peter Skoronski, and I'm not even sure Will Campbell's as good of a prospect as Peter Skoronski was, but they're similar in the fact that they're very good college tackles that will probably or have already kicked into guard at the next level, fell out of the top 10 despite being maybe the best overall offensive lineman in the draft. Campbell goes at 11 to Chicago, gives protection for Caleb Williams, who's being sacked at way too high of a rate. And it just feels like a perfect pick for Chicago. If Will Campbell's on the board, I think that's got to be the pick. Dolphins at 12. This is one, there are a lot of different ways you could go, right? Offensive line, you could take a shot. Totally could on an athletic, high upside guy like Cameron Williams, in my opinion. Now, that's originally what I was going to do here, but Malachi Starks is just sticking out, and I think he's such a great player. I think he's also probably a top 5 player in the draft. And I've mentioned a lot of those guys, but I think my top 5 right now would be some combination of Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter, Will Johnson, Mason Graham, and then maybe you're talking about Malachi Starks in that same mix. Luther Burden in that top 10, solidly, I would say. Genty in that top 5, maybe to round it out. And that could push somebody else that I named down. But Malachi Starks is great. The Dolphins may be losing Javon Holland to free agency. Enter Malachi Starks. Great player. Again, maybe a top 5 player in the draft. I know it's not a super valuable position. They've really been dinged up in the secondary this year, but Starks is not being drafted here for that reason. He is a future difference maker, big-time safety or nickel of the future, but he's really going to be a safety here. Javon Holland potentially on the way out, Malachi Starks on the way in. And I originally wasn't going to do that. I was originally going to invest in the offensive line and take a high upside player in Cameron Williams, but I've decided to shift here live and go Malachi Starks. Cowboys at 13. This is another one where I mean, you're hoping for Ashton Genty, right? But I was thinking about this when I did this last night, and I got to think, I'm not going to do it here, I don't think, but I do want to throw it out there. Bijan Robinson goes top 10 to the Falcons a couple years ago, right? And I think the Falcons are pretty happy with that pick. He's a really good player. However, after the Lions traded down, they ended up with the 12th overall pick. They drafted Jahmyr Gibbs, a pick I'm sure they're very happy with right now. He's been a great player as well, maybe even better than Bijan, although it's a very different situation in Atlanta and Detroit. However, Jahmyr Gibbs was the shock of the draft at the time. No one expected him to go at number 12. This was a guy who maybe was going to be a first-round pick despite being a great player. So I wonder, if you look at the Cowboys and think about how they really need to improve their run game, would they consider a running back at 13, even with Genty off the board? This is a fantastic running back class, which maybe means you don't need to take one at 13. You can wait for round 2 and go something else. But Caleb Johnson is a great player. Oh, I love Amarion Hampton. You've got some other really good backs down the board. Quinshawn Judkins, Travion Henderson, Dylan Sampson. I think Ollie Gordon might be headed back to school. But there are some really, really good options in the draft. I mean, Nick Singleton is a really nice player. There are so many good running backs in this class. But would you take the one you want at number 13? I don't know. I know that's a lot of talking just to do something else. I'm going to go Kenneth Grant with this pick. I know the Cowboys really need to improve their interior defensive line. It really looks like they did not hit with another Michigan defensive lineman in Mozzie Smith. I don't think that stops you from taking Kenneth Grant. He's a really good player as well, and I think could be a first-round pick. It's, far out at this point to say whether or not that's going to end up being the case. Outside of the top 10, who knows where these guys are going to go probably, but Kenneth Grant at number 13 to help out the Cowboys defensive line. 49ers at number 14. We're going to go Cameron Williams from Texas. High upside tackle, could start at right tackle, that's what he does at Texas, but is athletic enough to where he could potentially be your left tackle of the future post Trent Williams. And I think bottom line for San Francisco, they need to be a more physical football team. I mean, if you saw the game against Buffalo, I know it was snowing. I know they've been banged up, but they are not physical enough. And I think Cameron Williams, with his size and athletic ability, definitely helps you kind of change that. Colts at 15. I'm going Tyler Warren. I think Warren could end up being a top 20 pick. He's a really, really good player. And I think you look at, and he's not on the same level, but I think you look at what the Raiders have been able to get out of Brock Bowers this year. You can make a tight end the focal point of the offense nowadays and have some really, really good rewards if the player is good enough. And I think Tyler Warren is good enough. Not only does he have exceptional size at 6'6", 260, he can block a little bit, but he's a great receiving option. And I think giving Anthony Richardson more weapons to work with is not a bad idea. You have some good receivers for the future. Michael Pittman, Josh Downs, Adonai Mitchell, Alec Pierce. It's a good rotation. Even Ashton Dulin is not a bad rotational guy. But Warren at tight end is a big long-term upgrade over anybody that's there. Mo Alley Cox is aging. Andrew Ogletree is not on the same level and has some weird off-the-field stuff. Hopefully that doesn't come back to bite him at any point. Seems like it's not going to. But, you know, is he reliable? I don't know. I'm allegedly, whatever. I'm not going to say anything. But tight end's a need. You can't rely on Jelani Woods. He's been on IR his first 2 seasons. He doesn't play. Tyler Warren is a great player, and you help build around Anthony Richardson, who's starting to look a lot better as well. Almost like you shouldn't give up on him after 10 starts. I don't know. Bucks at 16. I keep going with the same pick here, and it's Jalen Walker for me every time. But T-Mac is sliding. Tetairoa McMillan is a great player. I considered him at 4, and now he's made it to 16. How long is Mike Evans going to play, right? You almost got to start thinking about a replacement. He's back on like a 1-year deal, right? Or a short-term deal at the very least. He wanted to remain in Tampa, but clock potentially running out on that. Could you try and get a Mike Evans replacement in Tetairoa McMillan to go along with Jalen McMillan? Who, I mean, that's kind of a fun combo. I'm actually going to pull the trigger on that. No relation to Jalen McMillan as far as I'm aware, by the way. But I think this is just a case similar to Ashton Genty where player just falls right into your lap and you pull the trigger. Yeah, the Bucks do need some other things, but when you factor in a long-term Mike Evans replacement, Tetairoa McMillan falling in the draft, I did not have this in the mock draft that I did in preparation for this video, but I've made some pick changes, and this is a result of that. I think that maybe he can fall due to some athletic concerns. Maybe he's not going to be as explosive. Maybe not going to have the electric speed that you're looking for, but is so good in so many other areas that I still think he is going to be a pretty high pick. Whether or not he gets out of the top 10 or the top 20, top 15, that remains to be seen. But I think the Bucks, you know, take a falling star and draft Tetairoa McMillan as things are getting interesting here. I really did not expect that to happen, but here we are. That brings up the Rams at 17. So, in the one I did of this previously, I had them going Josh Simmons. Really good player. Injuries could push him down the board. He's missing all of 2024, other than what he played so far, right? So, he's been out for a little while now. The Rams have done really well in the front 7 lately. They are missing that big-time Mike linebacker, though. I wonder what went wrong there. Traded Ernest Jones to Tennessee, who then traded him to Seattle. I don't know what's happening. It's very bizarre. He was a team captain. He requested a trade from LA, and the Rams just did it. I don't know. I don't know any of the details of that. Somebody can tell me in the comments what type of rift happened in order to set that up. And then Tennessee's really bad. Get something for him. He's going into a contract year. Maybe you don't think you can extend him. I don't know. But weird situation for sure. But they're missing that Mike. So I would consider, similarly to the way the Lions took Jack Campbell in this range, when we, started talking about them at number 12 with, Jahmyr Gibbs, maybe this is Jahad Campbell. That's an interesting option. Tackle's a need. Corner, definitely a need. I think they are missing that Mike. So we're going to go with something in that direction. Benjamin Morrison seems like the easy pick. I think injuries are going to push him down the board. He could still be a first-round pick. We'll have to see. We'll have to see on that. I think I might just stick to what I had. I'm going to go Josh Simmons here from Ohio State. He was really, really good pre-injury. He could have been maybe even a top 10 pick, first tackle off the board the way he was playing. You get him at 17 here as a result of the injury. At number 18, have the Arizona Cardinals. You've got great options here. They need to improve in the trenches, and you've got some great picks there. Nick Scorton, if you want maybe an edge rusher, but this is a really talented interior defensive line class, in my opinion. And one of the highest upside players in this class is the former number 2 overall recruit, just behind Travis Hunter, in Walter Nolan. Got the bag from A&M, decided to be an Aggie for a short time before getting a ton of money from Mississippi, and then transferring to Ole Miss. Nolan was the number 2 recruit in his class for a reason. This guy has shown flashes of dominance at Ole Miss this season. He can be a great player. Now, I didn't actually realize what I was doing at the time, but don't get flashbacks of Robert Nkemdiche, Ole Miss to Arizona. Walter Nolan has high upside, but hopefully can actually keep it together, unlike Robert Nkemdiche, who I loved. I loved him as a player. He was so good as a true freshman at Ole Miss. I mean, it was unbelievable. Walter Nolan's got really, really good potential, and he is the look of a top 10 pick that falls to 18 because of some inconsistencies, and he's a great player when he wants to be. We're going to see if that can be more regular in the NFL, but really high upside player, and the Cardinals snag him at 18. If not him, I like Derek Harmon or Nick Scorton with this pick. Atlanta at 19. This, for me, will be Nick Scorton. Scorton, really good fit in that Raheem Morris defense, in my opinion. 6'4", 285, can really get after the QB as well. He's a really good run defender with that size. Panthers are not a team here. Falcons really need to improve their pass rush, is where the PA and Panthers probably came from. Their pass rush is so bad. I mean, I think it might be the actual worst in the NFL. They get no pressure on the quarterback. I mean, absolutely none. It's embarrassing. If you come out of another draft without a difference-making defensive lineman, you got to fire the GM. You need to. I mean, Thomas Dimitrov would have been better. Anyway, Denver at 20. Denver's an interesting one. I think it's got to be something to help out the offense. I've gone Colston Loveland here before, and it's really tough to not do that again. But we're going to go with a receiver, Isaiah Bond from Texas. Hook 'em. Bond just has not been on the same page with Quinn Ewers this season, but is a really good player. He's open a lot. If you actually go in, watch the film, he's open almost every play. I mean, it's unbelievable. He's a very solid route runner with probably the best speed of any receiver in the draft. He can fly. Get him the football. He's a playmaker. He's been a little bit banged up this year. Production really hasn't been off the charts, but I think he would be a really fun weapon for Sean Payton. I think you just design him plays where he can get the football and make something happen. And for Bo Nix, who loves to throw the ball short, and that's, I think, a function of the offense as well, get it short to Isaiah Bond and let him just run past everybody. At number 21, we have the Seattle Seahawks. This was originally, for me, Malachi Starks. I think we all agree Seattle needs to upgrade their offensive line. Originally, for me, it was Malachi Starks. Instead, it will end up being the pick I had penciled in for the 49ers a bit early at 14 with Jonah Savaiinaia from Arizona. He's a really talented tackle that has guard experience. I think he could either be a guard or tackle at the next level. Has tackle size, but might just be better inside at guard. Really good player that gives you flexibility. I love his fit in Seattle. And also, another one of my favorite fits in the draft is going to be, and I'm probably just going to keep doing this a lot, Savone Revel from ECU. I think he's got the size that Dan Quinn really covets at corner, and he's shown that time and time again with Dallas, with Seattle. I think the Commanders are hoping and praying that Revel gets there with whatever spot they're picking, and they're probably going to win the division, it would appear, or get a playoff spot outside of Philly, maybe. If that doesn't happen, Philadelphia's actually been quite good. Maybe they're going to win the division now, but I think they're really hoping that Revel gets there. He's just a perfect fit. Yeah, Phillies come on really strong. They're probably going to win the division. Commanders have fallen off a little bit. Texans at 23. This is an interesting one because, again, their offensive line's really just not very good. It really isn't. And it feels like you need to improve that in a huge way. However, I'm actually going to go a different direction. But could this easily be offensive line? Yeah, Tyler Booker might be a first-round pick, might be a bit early. Outside of that, maybe you see Wyatt Milam, who has the potential to play guard. Ariante Ursary, I think, could be a first-round pick. But overall, I don't see a ton of first-round picks here with the remaining group. Maybe one of the Oregon tackles could move up quite a bit. We'll see on that. But D'Amico Ryans, head coach of the Texans, I think they're also really missing that big, impactful Mike of the future. And D'Amico Ryans, as a linebacker himself, maybe falls in love with Jihad Campbell and pulls the trigger on another Alabama linebacker to the Texans. It's a good storyline, but it's also a good fit. It's maybe not the most important need for the Texans, but is Jihad Campbell the piece that really, truly unlocks the defense? I think it could be. He's got big thumping size at 6'3", 245, but can really, really move, can cover in space. He's a great player. I think he's a first-round pick. I think he's LB1. I think the Texans makes sense as a landing spot. Yes, I understand they have other needs, but I think Campbell is a really, really good fit. Ravens at 24. This has worked out really, really great for the Ravens, and it's got to be Jalen Walker. He's going to go earlier than this. He's fallen for me. It's been tough to find a team that, really fits with needing a big-time edge rusher. Could have been Atlanta. I decided to go Nick Scorton. Could have been Arizona. Decided to go Walter Nolan on the interior. Could have been Seattle. Decided to go offensive line. Could have been the Bucks, of course, but Tet was available. The Tet offensive. Teteroa McMillan. 49ers also made sense, but Walker falls, and man, the Ravens jump all over this. Need to improve their pass rush. Walker helps you do that in a big way. He offers versatility that I know the Ravens will covet. I don't think he'll be available, but if he is, it's a slam dunk. Home run pick, Jalen Walker at 24. Chargers at 25. Colston Loveland turning the card. Michigan connection with Jim Harbaugh. Fills a need at tight end, and he's a really good player. Maybe more receiver than tight end in a way, but big weapon for Justin Herbert. He does not have nearly enough. If you look at the Chargers, if we're going to be really not pessimistic, but realistic about it, the Chargers have one weapon. It's Ladd McConkey. Johnston is unreliable. Is your next best weapon the healthy Will Dissly? Come on. Josh Palmer's probably gone in free agency. I don't know. You need something for Justin Herbert. Colston Loveland is that something. Steelers at 26. I talked about this earlier with Shamar Stewart being the Cam Hayward replacement. It was just an idea, because I think we've come out here in every mock draft, and I've pretty much done the same thing, and I've gone, hey, Steelers, Emeka Egbuka. They don't take wide receiver in the first round, but maybe they should, because outside of George Pickens, there's not really a ton there. Like, yeah, you have Calvin Austin. Roman Wilson has been a healthy scratch, I think, a lot. You need something reliable, and I think that's the definition of Emeka Egbuka. He catches the ball so well from the slot. He can make you miss after the catch. He is just a solid, reliable option. Is he going to be a dynamic playmaker? Maybe, maybe not. It depends what the offense wants to do, in my opinion, because I think you can say similar things about Jackson Smith and Jigba, and yes, two slot receivers from Ohio State. Egbuka is not on the same level of JSN as a prospect. I think JSN is really elite after the catch, and Egbuka is not quite on that same level. But they're both as steady as they come, and the Steelers, I think, are just missing a player like him. Emeka Egbuka to Pittsburgh. I know they don't take receiver. You could go different directions here. I liked Shamar Stewart as an eventual Cam Hayward replacement. 6'6", 290. He's not necessarily a 3-4 outside linebacker. I've never said that, although I think he actually can do that. He's a really good athlete. But anyway, we're going back to the well for Emeka Egbuka here. Green Bay at 27. I think they take a shot on Benjamin Morrison, corner, such a need. And this is a guy who can be a really good fit in the system. Of course, you bring over a DC from Boston College who really loves corners that can play press man, and that's what Benjamin Morrison does as well as almost any corner in this draft. Injuries push him down the board. He's another guy missing all of the rest of 2024, and apparently, some are really, really worried about his future because of the injury, but here he is at 27. He is a first-round talent, and he goes in the first round. Vikings at 28, I'm going to keep doing what I've been doing, and that is Caleb Johnson. Yes, it could be a different running back. I think Caleb Johnson is RB2 in the draft, just declared yesterday. He's another really, really good player, and if you have not watched Caleb Johnson, you need to. No one's talking about him. I don't know why. I'm not seeing it. If they are, I'm not seeing it. Iowa fans know, which means Vikings fans might know, as that Iowa-Minnesota connection is not that rare up there. Caleb Johnson is such a good player. I mean, if you love stats, which a lot of you do, check out his stats. They're phenomenal. I mean, he's averaging like almost 7 yards a carry and has rushed for, I think, over 1,500 yards, 20 touchdowns. He's put together a phenomenal season. And I think because it's Iowa, nobody really cares. But he's great. The Vikings need a running back of the future. Love Aaron Jones. Vikings need a running back for the future, though. Philadelphia Eagles. I think this is just an edge all day. I think it's got to be. And there are some really good ones available. Shamar Stewart, James Pierce, both might not be available at this point. And I think Pierce gives you a guy that can fly off the edge. And I think definitely goes earlier than this, and he falls to Philly. The rich get richer. Pierce offers you exceptional explosiveness as a true edge. And, I think you're missing that. They just really haven't had that upper echelon pass rush. I know Josh Sweat is coming on a little bit, but you need more. And I think Pierce is definitely that. You look at the draft history of Howie Roseman, and it's a lot of trenches, right? Pierce off the edge. I know you have Nolan Smith, but the fact of the matter with the NFL is you can never really have enough of these guys. And I think Pierce ends up being a really nice pickup there for Philadelphia. Although I could see Stewart, just because he's bigger, maybe offers you a little bit more versatility. Buffalo at 30. Going Derek Harmon. He's rated way too low on this board. I think he's going to be a first-round pick. And I think the Bills is a great spot. He is a disruptive force on the interior. And I think that would be a really good fit for the Bills. Their offense is in need of some more playmakers, no question. And their defense maybe could use a linebacker like Jahad Campbell. But Harmon is the move at 30. Chiefs at 31. Going to go Ariante Ursery here. They just need a tackle. Their O-line is, I think, really holding back the offense. You've got some great players on the interior. From left guard to right guard, it might not get any better in the NFL. You have some contenders, right? But Joe Thuney's arguably the best left guard in the league. Arguably. He's in the conversation. Top 3, no doubt. Creed Humphrey, one of the top 3 centers in the NFL? I think so. And then at right guard, how good is Trey Smith? He's definitely a top 10 right guard, probably even higher than that. So, tackle, I can't say as many nice things about tackle, unfortunately. Ariante Ursery ends up being the pick. Detroit Lions at 32 to round things out. I am going to go Shamar Stewart. I think he's going to go higher than this. Again, he's 6'6", 290. He moves like he's 250, 260. Explosive athlete that can do a number of things across the defensive line. And I'll tell you what, in terms of sheer size at defensive end, it doesn't get a lot bigger than what Detroit would have with Aiden Hutchinson and Shamar Stewart. And they're obviously very explosive athletes. Feels like a good fit for Detroit. Stewart, I think, ends up going earlier than this, but I've said that about a lot of players. Something's got to give. But I like this mock draft a lot. Change some things on the fly, and I think that is fun. It made me kind of reevaluate things in real time, and that's what the draft is in real life for GMs. So see what changes in real time, away from your expectation. Players go earlier, players fall than you expect all the time. And this ends up being the mock draft. That is Mock Draft Monday. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Although you didn't because it's a mock draft. You hated it. Your team should have taken whoever you wanted. And I'll see you in the next one. Take it easy.